I am joined by Robert Reitnecht, hospitality and luxury lifestyle brand advisor, coming to us from Connecticut. How are you?
Thank you, Jason. Doing great. I'm really happy to be here.
Good. What is a luxury lifestyle brand advisor?
So that's a great question. So what I do is I help the luxury service industry leaders personalize guest retention by teaching them how to offer authentic guest experiences that lead to overwhelming loyalty. And
Well,
of course, create amazing experiences.
well, how has your experience been over the past 12 months?
Well, the past 12 months, I recently was with an ultra luxury brand, um, and it was just an amazing experience. I was in Park City, Utah. So if you've never been to Park City, Utah, I would recommend you go there. I can always recommend places to stay, especially the place I was just with, or the resort. And I recently came back with COVID. My family was back here, and I moved back here, back to Connecticut, where I live, and I'm starting my own venture, or looking for my next great opportunity.
Okay. Well, you talk a lot about empathy, and if a hotel doesn't convey empathy, right? If they don't convey empathy, I mean, what kind of service are they apt to provide? Guest experience, sorry. Same thing.
Well, no, I'm glad you asked that question. Customer service, Jason, is not only the moment you serve a customer. It's a valuable relationship that has a past and a future. You really can't be successful long term in service if you don't really truly care or at all, and you really need to offer empathetic customer service. So the most important thing for me in customer service, must have is always empathy, and a caring deliverable whenever you're speaking to a guest. Your team, might have experts in how your business processes work, and you might have a great location, but your guests or customers need to feel well cared for. And by creating a personalized and authentic guest experience, they can feel like they're at home.
How easy is that? And
Um,
I'll ask you this because we're a software company that hires a lot of hoteliers.
right.
Our whole account management team, are hoteliers. So many times they've been in the shoes of our client, and it works so well. But from your experience, bringing somebody in and having that team deliver something memorable, unique, talkable, how easy is that?
Well, I don't think it's not as hard as you think. I think if you have the passion, and you're bringing on people into your team that are really authentic, and they really care about the customer, a lot of those fundamental practices are done. And I think that a lot of leaders, a lot of frontline uh, associates just overthink the process. So if you're just being yourself and really care about the customer who's in front of you, and really listening to their cues, I think that's the first step in really creating an amazing experience.
What do you think about guest feedback? I mean, how important is guest feedback really?
Well, for me and for others I know, and companies I've recently and worked with in the past, customer satisfaction is shown to really impact financial performance. Um, and it's important to collect feedback prior, during, and especially after a guest experience. Keeping a pulse of how you're making your guests feel. If you're really delivering on your brand promise, is critical. And having enough data, I would say probably 6 months of surveys. If you have a survey or a guest experience platform that you're working with, you really need to get an idea on how you're doing and what needs to improve. I recently worked with companies that we had they call it the top two box. So if your scores are from 0 to 10, Anything 8 or below really didn't count. And so you don't want to make your guest or your associates especially feel transactional. And you really want to really just create the experience, create that moment that you care about them. And if you look at the scores, when you go for the top 2 box, which are 9s and 10s, for example, if you're using that to score, that's financially linked to guests coming back, and that's what you want. We're in the repeat business, and you want to have your guests continually be promoters of your brand and win them over for life.
What about billing? People complain about billing a lot. Tie billing into guest experience.
I can tell you stories about billing, that I work with in the various companies I've been with. I think hotels sometimes forget that the billing process is really also an experience for the guest, and you really have to make sure you have an established process for recognizing your guest and how to really recover your guests to win them back. So you need to remember one thing that I know to be true, and you have to really be transparent and be honest with your guests if you make a mistake. I think that's so important that a lot of leaders and a lot of frontline associates don't really get. So I think that, it's okay. People make mistakes all the time, but you want to learn from those mistakes so you're not making them over and over. It's really easy to understand, what guests are doing, and especially when they're coming to you and they're paying out their hard-earned cash, for services you offer. You need to understand from their perspective, what they're looking for, and that goes back to your brand promise. And if it's not working, for example, I had situations that guests were continually coming up and complaining about the billing process. So if the process is really being too difficult for the guests to understand, you really need to look at that, evaluate that to see are there different ways to make it more transferable or transparent to the guests so they understand it. And this also can change how your guests feel about, when they're leaving the resort. You never actually want to have your guest walk away with a billing problem. And you really want to do everything you can to resolve it in first contact. I can't tell you how many times I've had teams I've worked with and associates that work with me that they would come in with billing problems. So we really need to teach your associates how to deal with that, because that also impacts the financials and the return on investment that you're making, not only in your staff, but for the guests to come back. And I think that's so important. You really need to give them also a mindset and empower them. I know Ritz-Carlton, for example, gives a great example that I remember when I went work with them about empowering employees to create a luxury experience. And you really want to put the guest first in every moment that you're working with them.
What kind of advice can you give hoteliers as we continue through this?
I think you need to just stay true to your word as far as continually bring on people that really care about the industry and want to do well with your brand, that they resonate not only with your brand, but they also work very closely with your guest. Did I answer your question? I want to make sure I answered your question.
Yes, you nailed it. That's some good advice. Well, thank you for joining me, Robert.
Thanks, Jason. And thank you. I hope your listeners take some of the advice. And just to let you know, I do have a handout. If they go to my website, they can, it's robertreitnecht.com, and they can get a free handout on the guest experience strategy and focusing on the core elements of service excellence.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.